You may not be looking, but reality is. There's a silent field surrounding you every day. It doesn't move only when you wish, ask, or consciously manifest. It also responds to what you try to avoid, to what you pretend not to feel, to what you even hide from yourself. This field, invisible to the eyes but sensitive to your vibration, is always listening to your energy, not just your words. And often, it's precisely what you don't observe that shapes your experience the most. Think for a moment. What have you been avoiding facing? A past wound? A recurring pattern? A decision you keep postponing? Maybe an uncomfortable feeling that surfaces at random times, and that you keep pushing back into the shadows every time it tries to emerge. The most challenging truth of this reality is that it doesn't wait for your permission to reflect what's vibrating inside you. The universe doesn't distinguish between what is conscious or unconscious. It simply mirrors. And that which you ignore most fiercely becomes stronger behind the veil. Today in this video, you'll understand how what goes unobserved is actually steering your life through silent paths. You'll realize that your true power doesn't lie only in focusing on what you want, but in illuminating the areas where your consciousness hasn't yet arrived. Because what you refuse to see still creates with you. The universe doesn't only respond to what you want, it responds to what you avoid. You've learned that focus creates reality, that what you pay attention to grows, expands, and takes form in the physical world. And that's true, but that's only half of the equation. The other half, far more subtle and often overlooked, is that the universe also responds to what you avoid, to what you sweep under the energetic, emotional, vibrational rug, to what you don't want to feel, think about, or remember. Yes, the universe responds to your desires, but it also responds to your resistance. Reality is not shaped only by what you consciously want. It's shaped by the total frequency of your field, including everything you reject or try to silence. Emotions you've buried in the basement of the mind, traumas you chose to forget without truly healing, destructive habits you try to ignore even as they drain your energy. All of these continue to vibrate in the background of your consciousness, fueling patterns that keep repeating in your life. You might say, I want peace, abundance, love. But inside, if you're constantly fleeing discomfort, avoiding anxiety, the fear of lack, or the feeling of unworthiness, the universe is responding to that hidden vibration just as precisely as it responds to your conscious desires. Because to the quantum field, there is no difference between what you wish for and what you fear, between what you declare and what you repress. It's all vibration. It's all information being emitted. It's all creation. And what goes ignored doesn't disappear. It gains power. What you don't fully feel remains fragmented inside you, spinning in quiet circles like a wave that never ceases. You may not be looking at it, but your energy is constantly feeding that frequency. What is avoided becomes a hidden engine, influencing your choices, your reactions, your reality. That's why so many people live in cycles they can't break. They use affirmations, visualizations, try to change their thoughts, but deep down, there are still layers being ignored. And as long as those layers remain unseen, unacknowledged, and unintegrated, they'll keep sending signals to the universe, signals that sustain exactly what they're trying to leave behind. This is one of the most subtle and powerful laws of conscious creation. You don't create only with what you desire. You create with what you are. And what you avoid feeling is also a part of who you are right now. Pretending it doesn't exist doesn't change your frequency, but observing it honestly, courageously, with presence, does. That's what transforms. The invitation here is not to blame yourself for everything that's been hidden, but to start realizing that these forgotten parts of you are asking for light. The universe isn't punishing you, it's mirroring you. It's showing you, through your reality, everything that still needs to be seen, accepted, and released. Not to hurt you, but to set you free. When you understand this, something shifts. The desperate need to change the outer world gives way to a willingness to look within. And in that honest gaze, you begin to reclaim your true creative power. Not the power to control what happens, but to transform the vibration that sustains what happens. Because when you stop running, reality stops chasing you. It aligns. It responds with clarity, and everything begins to reorganize. The observer's blind spot creates distortions in reality. There's a part of your consciousness that sees, understands, and chooses clearly. But there's also a part you haven't accessed yet, an internal space that remains in the dark, not out of malice or carelessness, but because certain wounds, memories, or beliefs were left there, outside the field of your awareness. This space is what we call the observer's blind spot, and it's precisely where many distortions begin. The blind spot is anything you still can't face with full presence. It may be an automatic behavior you justify, but no longer serves you. It may be a feeling you rationalize but never truly embrace. It may be a story you keep telling about yourself without realizing you're stuck in an old, limiting version. And every ignored fragment continues to send subtle signals, interfering with how you interpret the world around you. When you look at the world through a blind spot, you project onto others what you haven't yet recognized in yourself. You react to the external with disproportionate intensity because unknowingly, you're responding to something inside you that still hasn't healed. And so, your reality becomes distorted. Not because the universe is against you, but because you're seeing the world through lenses fogged by unacknowledged parts. These distortions show up as recurring patterns, situations that repeat in different forms, but with the same vibrational essence. You may move cities, change jobs, start new relationships, yet the same feeling returns. The same sense of emptiness, frustration, or limitation. This happens because the blind spot remains unaddressed, unintegrated, silently active. And it's not always about traumatic memories or major events. Sometimes the blind spot is a subtle belief learned in childhood that was never questioned. Like the idea that it's dangerous to trust, or selfish to want more, or that you must suffer to deserve. These beliefs, when left in the dark, become invisible filters that distort your choices, your perception, and thus your creation. It's crucial to understand that these blind spots are not mistakes. They're part of your expansion process. They show you where the light of your awareness has not yet reached. And it's precisely where the pain is hidden that the portal to transformation opens. Because while you fight external symptoms, the conflicts, the failures, the obstacles, the root remains untouched. What needs your attention isn't out there, but in what you haven't yet observed sincerely. When you begin to acknowledge your blind spots with honesty and courage, something aligns in your field. Energy leaks start to seal, repetition loses strength, silent self-sabotage dissolves. Because now, instead of denying or fleeing, you're present. And presence is the greatest form of healing. The blind spot only has power as long as it remains unseen. The moment you see it, not with judgment, but with compassion, it stops running your reality. You stop being led by shadows and begin to create with clarity and true intention. That is the role of the awakened observer, not to control everything, but to see deeply, and in seeing, transform. The fear of observing activates the silent loop. The fear of looking within is one of the oldest and deepest mechanisms of the human being. It's not weakness, it's instinct. It developed as a form of protection, a vibrational shield against anything that could cause pain. But what many don't realize is that by avoiding the things that hurt, we don't get rid of the pain. We simply keep it alive in a silent underground loop that shapes our reality without us noticing. When you avoid observing something, an uncomfortable emotion, a troubling thought, an unresolved memory, you don't eliminate that energy. On the contrary, you trap it in a vibrational loop. It keeps spinning in your field, in the background, like a song playing just low enough for you not to notice clearly, yet loud enough to influence your mood, your choices, your relationships. This silent loop feeds itself. The more afraid you are to feel something, the more energy you expend trying to control your experience. And the more you try to control, the more life shows you that something is out of balance. Situations repeat, triggers return, Emotions emerge in unexpected ways, as if reality is trying more clearly each time to push you toward what you insist on avoiding. This is the paradox. In trying to flee from pain, you keep it alive. In trying not to think about something, you create such intense resistance that the quantum field registers it as an active emission. The universe doesn't register denial, it registers vibration, and fear, even when veiled, is a potent vibration. It informs the field that something is being fed energetically, even unconsciously. The fear of observing also feeds internal fragmentation. You split into parts, one that tries to move forward, make conscious choices, grow, and another that's always looking over its shoulder, hoping what's been repressed won't resurface. But it does. It always does. Because what is not seen with consciousness is seen with fear. And what is seen with fear becomes shadow. And shadow doesn't mean evil. It means absence of light. Many times the fear isn't even of the pain itself, but of what we think it will cause. We fear collapsing, losing control, discovering something about ourselves we don't know how to handle. But the truth is, the pain you resist is always greater than the pain you actually feel. The energy of resistance is exhausting, constant, and it becomes chronic tension, anxiety, emotional fatigue. That's why the simple act of observing, even briefly, even trembling, begins to dissolve the loop. When you choose to sit in silence and allow the emotion to arise, without identifying with it, without trying to fix it right away, something begins to realign in your field. You begin to see that what once seemed like a monster was just a wounded part asking for attention, that the chaos was simply a call for acceptance, that the pain wanted to be felt so it could leave. You don't need to dive headfirst into your abysses, but you do need to stop running from them, because it's that constant flight that keeps you stuck. The fear of observing is what activates the cycle, but the decision to observe, even in fear, is what begins to break the pattern. You may not look consciously, but your vibration is looking. You may forget, but your field remembers, and life responds to that field with precision. When you understand this, fear becomes a portal, and what was once avoidance becomes the path. Because what you fear seeing the most may be exactly what needs your light the most. And the light of the awakened observer has the power to transform any shadow, not by force, but through presence. What is ignored takes form in the mirror of reality. Nothing you feel or think is wasted in the universe. No ignored emotion, no repressed memory, no avoided truth simply disappears. Everything you choose not to face with awareness accumulates, moves, expresses itself. Not in the inner world where it was hidden, but in the outer mirror of reality. What you silently reject, the universe reflects loudly and clearly. Life then becomes a kind of expanding reflection of what you have not yet integrated. Situations don't arise by chance. They don't repeat out of cruelty or bad luck. They appear as tangible manifestations of an invisible field you carry. A field shaped not only by your conscious intentions, but also by the emotions you try to silence, the conflicts you postpone, the parts of you that remain unaccepted. That's why, even without understanding how, many people live through the same cycles, face the same challenges, attract relationships with similar patterns. It's not bad luck, it's a mirror, a reflection of what has not been resolved. The universe doesn't want to hurt you, it wants to show you, to clearly reveal what's vibrating inside you, even if you're not aware of it. Because everything that is denied in the mind must be lived in the body of reality. Ignoring signs of exhaustion, for example, doesn't erase the exhaustion. It only delays the collapse. The body then screams where the soul was silenced. A health crisis, extreme fatigue, creative blocks. All of these may be direct reflections of disconnection from a truth that was there, trying to be heard. Reality forces a pause when you refuse to listen to the whisper of your soul, and it's not revenge, it's compassion disguised as discomfort. The same applies to emotional patterns. Ignoring a feeling of abandonment that was never sincerely acknowledged makes you attract relationships that reinforce that feeling. Not because you deserve to suffer, but because reality is trying to push you inward, to look at what got stuck in time, to heal what was frozen inside you. It's not punishment, it's revelation. And this revelation doesn't always come through pain. Sometimes it comes through repetition. Life repeats until you notice, until you're tired of blaming the world, others, circumstances, and start to investigate what inside you is asking for presence. The external speaks to you all the time. It shouts when you ignore, it whispers when you listen, it quiets down when you understand. This is the role of the mirror of reality, to return to you the vibrational image you're emitting, even if you don't realize it. And the more you avoid a part of yourself, the more that part gains prominence in the outside world. As if saying, "Look at me, I'm here, I am you." Pain only appears as form when it can no longer be ignored as energy. And what manifests externally is not the problem, it's the messenger. When you change how you respond to these reflections, everything changes. Instead of resisting, you begin to listen. Instead of denying, you begin to integrate. And in that moment, the mirror no longer needs to scream. Reality becomes lighter, more fluid, more aligned with what you truly desire. Because in the end, what you ignore inside, the universe will show you outside, not to punish you, but to set you free. Reality is nothing more than a generous, even if sometimes uncomfortable, reflection of what most needs your light. And when you learn to see through the eyes of awareness, everything that once felt like repetition is revealed as an opportunity for healing. Observing what you once avoided is a portal to transformation. There comes a moment on the path when running no longer works, when everything you've tried to avoid returns, stronger, in new forms, no longer demanding resistance, but presence. And it's in this moment, when you stop running and start looking, that something profound begins to happen. Because observing what you once avoided isn't just an act of emotional courage. It is a true portal to energetic transformation. The simple decision to look, to feel, to allow what was once avoided to exist under the light of your awareness changes the structure of your field. Not because the content shifts instantly, but because your relationship to it does. What was once shadow, when touched by the light of your honest gaze, begins to dissolve. And what was once fear, when embraced without judgment, begins to reveal itself as strength. Observation is not rationalization. It's not trying to figure everything out with the mind. It is allowing what was hidden to rise like a wave, like a memory, like a sensation, and to be fully witnessed, without rushing it away, without demanding it make sense. Because the true power of the observer does not lie in analysis. It lies in presence. Presence transforms. Conscious attention reorganizes. A loving gaze unlocks. When you finally sit with what you've been avoiding, an old wound, a constant emptiness, a recurring pattern, and inwardly say, "I see you," a part of you that had been frozen begins to thaw. Stagnant energy starts to move again. The frequency shifts, and this internal change, subtle and silent, is immediately felt in the field around you. The universe responds with vibrational precision. It doesn't wait for you to have everything figured out. It reacts the moment you choose to see. Because to truly see, at the level of consciousness, is all ready to begin healing. It's all ready to begin exiting the loop of automatic repetition and entering the cycle of conscious creation. You don't need to know how to fix what you feel. The process doesn't demand immediate solutions. It requires space. Space to feel, space to exist, space to integrate. And that space is born in the simple, profound act of observing without fleeing, without trying to fix, without forcing a spiritual explanation before it's time. Because often healing lives in quiet acceptance, not in rushed understanding. If you want to begin this process now, simply ask yourself, what have I been avoiding looking at? It may be a specific fear, a stored resentment, a truth that's hard to admit. Upon identifying it, breathe, sit with it. Imagine yourself creating internal space to simply let this energy exist without resistance. You're not allowing it to overpower you. You're allowing it to reveal itself so that it can finally transform. This act of conscious observation is one of the most revolutionary things you can do, because it breaks the vibrational pattern of denial, which is exactly what feeds repetition. It deactivates the automatic urge to flee. And in place of escape, you create presence. And in presence, you find power. Observing what you once avoided is like opening a window in a dark room. Darkness isn't eliminated by force. It disappears when light enters. You are that light, and your awareness is the key that opens the portal. What once seemed impossible to face becomes tolerable, then understandable, and eventually unnecessary. Not because it magically vanished, but because it was integrated. This is the beginning of true freedom, when you realize you no longer need to flee in order to feel safe. When you understand that looking at pain with compassion is the most direct way to move through it, and what you were avoiding was really waiting for you, not to break you, but to reveal you. Change your relationship with what you've ignored. Don't fight, observe with compassion. Most people, when they begin to look within, carry a subtle expectation that self-knowledge will bring quick answers, instant relief, or at least more control over their pain. But true awakening doesn't begin with control. It begins with surrender. Real transformation happens when you change how you relate to what you once ignored, not by trying to fix or eliminate it, but simply by observing it with compassion. Observing with compassion is the antithesis of struggle. It's the opposite of the constant attempt to improve at all costs. While the conditioned mind wants to rid itself of whatever feels imperfect or negative, the awakened consciousness sits with it and simply says, "You are allowed to be here." It's in that silent acceptance that stuck energy begins to dissolve, not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding resistance. Compassion doesn't require you to like what you feel. It doesn't ask you to approve of the memories, thoughts, or impulses that arise. It simply creates a space where all of it can exist without being denied. Because as long as you reject parts of yourself, you remain divided. And that internal division is what perpetuates conflict, repetition, and the silent pain that never resolves. When you shift that internal posture and begin to look at your emotions not as enemies but as legitimate expressions of something that wants to be seen, everything begins to change. Not immediately on the outside, but on the inside, where the root of it all lives. Energy that once needed to manifest as crisis, tension, or blockage now finds space to dissolve in the peace of your presence. This process is more delicate than it seems. It doesn't require strength, it requires gentleness. Gentleness is a high form of wisdom, because it doesn't come from the ego, it comes from awareness. And awareness, when truly present, doesn't judge, it simply sees. When you see with compassion, you reclaim lost parts of yourself. Parts that were rejected out of fear, shame, or trauma, yet still call for return. And you don't need grand internal speeches or elaborate rituals. You just need to be there with yourself without trying to escape. There is a healing silence that arises when you stop fighting. When you drop the effort to be different, better, more enlightened, more evolved. That constant effort to be someone who doesn't feel, doesn't make mistakes, doesn't fail, that's exactly what blocks real expansion. Because the soul doesn't evolve through rejection of itself. It evolves through integration, and only what is embraced can be integrated. When you observe what you once judged as wrong in yourself through the eyes of compassion, you begin to transmute it. Not because you forced a change, but because you allowed the energy to return to its natural flow. Fear begins to reveal wisdom. Anger shows where power was suppressed. Sadness points to where connection was lost. Every emotion that once felt like an obstacle becomes a messenger, and you, the observer, become the guardian of that sacred process. Compassion is revolutionary because it breaks the cycle of energetic self-violence that happens whenever you try to improve yourself just to be accepted, loved, or worthy. The moment you shift that inner relationship and begin to meet yourself where you are, with everything you feel, everything you are, reality begins to resonate with that frequency, because the universe mirrors your relationship with yourself. Observing with compassion is not passivity, it is the most powerful action there is. because it doesn't work on the surface. It operates in the deepest layers of your vibration. And in those layers, true acceptance heals more than any technique. When you gaze with gentleness, even what once felt unforgivable begins to be understood. When you listen to yourself with love, even what once felt unbearable begins to transform into strength. This is the wisdom of the awakened observer. They don't judge the shadow, they illuminate it with presence. And the light that is born of this isn't blinding, it's welcoming. It integrates, it liberates. We've reached the end of our journey, but perhaps for you this is truly the beginning of a new way to see, to feel, to dwell in your own awareness. You now understand that reality doesn't only respond to your clear desires, it also responds to the parts you hide. What is avoided continues to create. What is unseen continues to vibrate. And the universe, in its infinite intelligence, reflects it all, not to punish, but to reveal. Life stops shouting when you begin to listen to what you've been ignoring. When you look, feel, and allow, something subtle shifts. And it's exactly in that space of acceptance that transformation becomes inevitable. May you choose today one blind spot to illuminate. May you have the courage to look with presence and compassion. And from that, allow reality to reorganize around your new gaze. Nothing changes from the outside in. Everything changes when the observer awakens and chooses to look where they never dared to look before.